Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to Office Hours with AvaTax. I'm Ted Spence, the director of the AvaTax API team, and I've got with me a collection of awesome dudes from both marketing and the developer relations group. Today we've got an interesting little chat. We're going to talk a bit about error codes. But I do want to mention here, we just finished a fantastic conference. We just got back from Crush DC, where I met a number of you, and I hope to meet more of you again next year at Crush in Huntington Beach, California. I know they've just started talking about it. We don't have an advertising banner up yet, but maybe that'll happen sometime soon. So anyways, it was a ton of fun. We've got some great people working on all sorts of problems with AvaTax. Today we wanted to talk a bit about error codes, because everyone is going to see an error at some point in their life. And frankly, the only thing that comes to mind is Johnny Five. So frankly, you know, if you don't have a robot that's going nuts after getting hit by a lightning bolt during a storm, you know, like you're not really making an 80s movie. Although I'm trying to remember now, there was this other 80s movie about a guy who had a home computer that went nuts when he spilled his drink on it. Does anyone remember that one?
Yes, but what is it called?
Oh my gosh, there's no
Weird Science.
No.
Intentional.
There was one where the dude's an architect, and
right.
he's trying to write poetry or something on his computer to his girlfriend, and he spills the drink, and the computer comes alive, and it's very weird. But anyways, error codes. Part of the reason we talk about this is because everyone gets started with AvaTax with different expectations. Everybody shows up here and they say, great, I want to put tax into my product. They're going to start writing code against it. Sooner or later, something's going to go wrong. And that's totally normal and that's totally expected. And the best thing that we can do as Avalara is to give you an error code that is something you can understand. So I wanted to spend a few minutes and just talk about like what we did for error codes. I mean, John Horsley, you've been around for pretty much forever. You've dealt with all of the error codes in the past. What was it like dealing with people on our previous generation of error codes?
Well, back when I started, error codes were very much a black box of what do we do, because responses back to what they were kind of vague, and it was always interesting trying to track down what the error code was, how to help them get through it, how to figure out what side of the table it's on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it used to be very difficult.
So I have a page here. There's actually still a web page in the developer site that lists these old error codes. And some of them make a decent amount of sense, like company not found error. All right, okay, I kind of understand what that is. But the amount of text that we have explaining this is just really not that detailed. And equally well, the next error you get to, this is the one that everyone deals with sooner or later. It's called doc status error. Man, that was just not a great error code, was it?
No, that was probably the most misnomered error code we had to explain in support all the time.
Yeah.
Because it comes up, and what does doc status mean? What does doc status invalid mean?
And here's the other problem is that because Avalara's SOAP API has been so successful for such a long time, like everybody's products expect these error codes. Everybody's software is hard-coded to expect certain error codes in certain situations. And there are so many people out there who've integrated it, we kind of made the decision that it's not a good idea to change things unexpectedly on people.
Yep.
So on the other hand, we said, hey, when people are using our new REST API, we want the error codes to make a little bit more sense. So what I'm going to do for the rest of today's chat is I'm going to talk a little bit about various errors and various things that can happen when you're using REST. And I have with me here Jeff Meisner from our marketing group. Jeff is going to facilitate this call. So if anyone on this phone wants to chat about their favorite error code or their least favorite error code, or if anyone knows the name of that 80s movie with the computer that goes sentient and is writing poetry to the dude's girlfriend.
Oh, is it Electric Dreams?
Come on, man. You're supposed to let the customers get that one.
Oh.
I don't know, man.
You asked and it popped in my head, so I'm like.
And you got the movie and comics person.
Right, it's what I do.
So that's the crazy thing is all I remember from the movie is there's this scene where he's holding up a gigantic puzzle and shaking it. And then pieces start falling out, and he uses this to design new bricks or something like that.
I'm curious to know if that's it, or what it is.
It's entirely possible, but man, I watched too many movies in the 80s. So, anyways, getting back to life. Jeff Meisner will take phone calls, and you've already heard the phone ringing already, so hopefully it's not a difficult question. But Jeff will take your questions, so just go ahead and put a message in on the chat channel, and Jeff will ping me and let me know when I have to pause to talk about it. So here we did a new page to list all of the error codes that are in our AvaTax REST API. And what we did is, rather than just list a basic description of the error code, we actually have a full page that says, this is what the error message looks like. Here's our explanation of what this error message is, and here's what you could do about it. So we wanted to go a little bit farther than in the past. And each error has its own code, and it has its own number. Now, I think code is far more useful than number, but I could totally imagine a scenario where maybe you just want to track error numbers, or maybe your software is just better tuned to handling that. Because, you know, everyone's got different integrations, right?
Right. Everybody handles things differently.
So basically, this code and this number refer to the same thing, but the message and the description, these are intended to be things that you can use in your integration. You know, the best way to describe it is that the message is the smallest possible bit of text that can explain what's going on. We're trying to be as completely concise as possible, because there are a lot of integrations that they just want a way to show a brief explanation of what happened. A good example of this is in the AvaTax update website. If you make a mistake, if you type in some bad data and you hit submit, you'll get this error message field shown to you in the user interface. So this error message is intended to be something that a user could understand and could interpret. In the case of authorization failed, it's pretty simple. You're not authorized to use this. The description is intended to be a little bit more explanatory. So, I mean, you've seen connectors. There's some connectors that have little bits of space and some that have more, right?
Right.
Like, what would you recommend to people?
It really depends on what they have, what they have room for in their integration. If you have room to display the description, I would say display it, because it tells you more of what you're getting. But if a lot of integrations don't have the space for a full description, then the message is going to suffice. You have to understand you may have to look that up to find out more information on it.
Gotcha. And that more information thing is really critical. Like this field right here, help link, will give you a direct link into Avalara's developer site, and it will explain what is this error. So if you're building an integration and you get an error, you could actually just give your customers the ability to click on this link and go to this page and see what's happening. I can't tell you if that's appropriate or not. I don't know that every connector wants to have that kind of a link, but it's there for you if you want to use it. So, you know, really, probably those four fields are the ones that you want to think about. You want to think about the code, the message, the description, and the help link. You could use the number field if you want. You don't have to. The fault code, that's our best explanation of, did something go wrong with the server, or is it something that you need to fix on the client side? So interestingly enough, we at Avalara, we actually have error codes for server-side problems too. This is actually one that I deal with a lot, server configuration problems. Now, hopefully no customer on this call has ever seen it. Have you guys ever seen this?
No, I've not seen it.
So I see this all the time in deployments. So when I'm managing a deployment, or when people are launching a new release of our product, what we'll do is we'll do preliminary deployments to a variety of environments. And when we deploy to that environment, if things don't load up correctly, if the server's not set up right, or if it doesn't have access to the resources it needs, you'll get this massive error here. It'll just go blow up instantly. And every time this error message comes up, I actually get a ping on Slack. And I know we finally got Jeff Meisner hooked onto Slack recently, but
now I can annoy all of you on your chosen comms method.
Yeah, I know. The last time that Punk messages me, he tells me he just bought a classic Dr. Strange comic.
Dr. Strange #1.
Yeah,
Nice.
come on.
Published just months before I was born.
Was that a Ditko or was it
No,
who's the artist?
I can't remember who the artist was.
Okay. But anyways, classic Marvel comics. I think we're all big into that right now. I have really struggled to get into comics past the Chris Claremont era.
So good.
Yeah. Who was it who wrote Excalibur? Do you remember? That was the spin-off from X-Men.
I think that was Chris Claremont.
Was it?
It was Claremont too, yeah.
Okay.
The English version, yeah.
At a certain point, when Chris Claremont went off of Excalibur, like that was just it. I kind of stopped collecting comics.
Yeah, Claremont was so good on X-Men too. His X-Men stuff is amazing.
Yeah, but anyway, you guys all don't need to hear about that. So let's go back to some error codes. We've got a section here in the developer guide called troubleshooting, and we talk a little bit about this. Some of the things that I'm talking to you here are covered in the developer guide, and those of you who came to Crush this year will actually have had a paper copy of the developer guide that I've been handing out, which was a huge hit. So key thing to think about is whenever you call AvaTax, if you get a response code that is between 400 and 499 inclusive, those error codes indicate that something went wrong on the client side. If you get an error message from 500 to 599, that means AvaTax itself blew up. Something within AvaTax is not functional. So I think the only error code in 500 that you really need to pay attention to is too many requests, right? Does anyone know what the HTTP response code is for too many requests? Han is already looking it up. His fingers are fast.
429.
429. Okay, so that is a client error then. That error will only ever show up if you call the tax rates by postal code API too many times. That's our free API, and the only thing that is a limitation on the free API is that if you try to hit us with a denial of service attack, we'll give you that error message. So anyways, if you see an error message between 400 and 499, you'll get this response. This is basically what it will look like. And we give you a couple suggestions for how you could display it. You could display the error message, you could display the description, the help link, but what you'll notice here is that you could get more than one error message. So, any of you guys know what circumstance you could get more than one error message in a response?
Well, what I've seen in wandering through when I was working on the REST development, if there was, say, bad in landing cost, bad HS code, and missing parameters, missing required parameters.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, if you have more than one error in your API call, you'll get more than one error message. So let's go ahead and give that a try right now. So I'm going to go onto the developer site, and let's go ahead and try to create a transaction. So, I mean, this is obviously the first thing most people are going to do, right? Well, if you go here into the Create Transaction API, and you just submit it, look at this. I'm submitting garbage. I'm submitting nothing. Well, it's going to tell me that the date field is required. All right, well, what happens if I put date in there? Let's submit it again. Oh, boy. Lines is required. Customer code is required. So what you can see is it's telling me all of the different problems. It's telling me each thing that's required. And I'm already noticing that I should have gotten all three of these error messages first. Like if you don't submit date, you should actually get 3 error messages, not 1. So can somebody take a note on that? We're going to have to fix that.
I'm on it.
This is what I love about giving demos is, you find all sorts of things that, you need to improve. So anyways, the point of this is that if I actually submitted the regular sample data, I'd get a response. But if I go in and I start removing some fields, well, eventually I'm going to get some error messages. Some of these things are acceptable to omit, but some of these things will give you an error message if you omit it. There you go. Now I'm getting an error message. So part of what's going on is this error message is trying to tell you what you've forgotten. And this error message will always have this link. But if you notice right here, this value is actually from my message. So if you look at value required error, let's go back in here. This error message is universal for whenever a field is required. This error message is intended to be used anytime there's a required field that you have not actually filled out. So you're going to get this exact same error message regardless of what API call you make, as long as you're missing something. So that's a key thing to think about. You have to pay attention a bit to this error message is not specific to create transaction. It's not specific to create company. It's just a general purpose error message. Then you get a whole bunch of really interesting messages. This one right here is a particularly interesting one because this is a very specific single scenario error message. This one right here says that if you're filing returns, you have to have a taxpayer ID number. And this is actually, this one comes up a lot because there are a lot of cases where it's totally okay to omit your taxpayer ID number. And then once in a while, when you happen to omit it and you get this error message, people will complain to me. They'll say, I thought that field is required, right? So how would you actually investigate this? When I am creating a company, I use the Create Company API. And I look at the company model, and the company model says, if I scroll down just a little bit here, it says this field is optional, right? Is it optional?
Conditionally.
Conditionally, okay, there you go. What does conditionally mean?
It's optional if we're not filing for you.
Gotcha. So because this was a very common problem, I had to go in and rewrite this error message here. I had to rewrite this field definitions, and I had to rewrite the error message to try to make that more clear. Because a lot of people will just focus on this optional. And the answer is that the Swagger spec has a flag that says this field can be null or the field cannot be null. It doesn't say this field can be null only in some circumstances. It doesn't have there is no field in the Swagger spec that allows you to say this field is optional as long as you're not filing returns in the United States. Swagger spec people did not work for Avalara. So that can be really confusing, but that's something that you have to pay attention to. So optional is a true statement to say there is at least one circumstance where it is possible for this field to be null. But it doesn't mean that it's all over the place. Jeff, was that you? Are you telling me there's a...
I'm flagging you.
Okay.
There's a question. Okay. I'm upgrading from SOAP to REST. Will my error codes change?
Oh boy, well, yes. So the answer is yes. The error codes are very different between SOAP and REST. And what we're doing is we're working very hard to try to make all of the REST error codes as clear and explanatory as possible. And we're also trying to teach people not to depend on specific error numbers or specific error messages. We're going to be constantly editing and improving the phrasing of our error messages in REST. So everything that is the error message, actually, let's go back to this one in specific, the taxpayer number required. We reserve the right to make changes to this error message anytime we need to. Because anytime we discover that a lot of customers are having problems, we're going to edit this and try our best to make it as useful as possible. We're going to continually edit our description. We're definitely not going to change this error code, but new errors could come in as we uncover new circumstances. There could be a case where we say, hey, taxpayer number is required for the European Union. It's possible that they will eventually have something that we have to use that field for. At the moment, that isn't the case, but we could expand upon this. So what we want to teach you is, we want to teach you how to basically look at, this page right here. We want to teach you how to look at the error messages, pull them out, and make use of them in your application. There is a lot of difference between these SOAP error codes. There's 20 or 30 SOAP error codes, but there's a lot of REST error codes. If you look at it, our numbers go up to 1,000, but there's really probably 100, 150 error codes in REST. And every time we're looking at this, we're trying to fine-tune these and simplify them down and make them as easy for people to understand as possible. So short answer is, yeah, you've got some changes you'll have to make, but we do hope that those are good changes. We hope that those are ones that will be convenient for you. So continuing on, we talked a little bit about taxpayer number required, but what you see right here is I tried to write an explanation that will help people understand why this error message cropped up. We're explaining that if you are subscribed to Avalara Managed Returns, if you are using an SST certified service provider, then you have to give us your taxpayer ID number. We're explaining what the taxpayer ID number is. We give you a description of what the format is likely to be, and we kind of explain why we need it here. So if at any point you uncover a question with this, I'd like to draw your attention to this forums community discussion right here. If you see an error message that you don't understand, just click on this, type in, I don't understand this error message. I am a US customer, and you could explain your circumstance. You post this message, we want to talk to you. One of our developer community team will wind up getting assigned, probably Wayne, one of our developer community team members will probably get assigned this question, and they'll have to give you a response. Isn't that the highlight of your day, Wayne?
I actually look forward. I really enjoy working in the forums and in the developer community. Get a lot of insight and good answers. People are finding, small issues for us all, and also we get to see what people are doing with their different implementations.
That was an excellent diplomatic answer. It's exactly the kind I would give if my boss was on the call. No, but anyways, Wayne is talking to customers all the time, and he's a pretty good guy to hang out with. So if you talk to him about an error message, he'll respond with a joke of some kind. 80s movies, that seems to be our theme. So
Heart beeps. I'm gonna bring
heart beeps.
Yeah, that.
What the heck was that one?
2 robots that come to life.
Heart beeps.
Yeah,
Heart beeps?
I think that's what it was called. Another 80s movie.
Okay.
I'd look that one up. There's so many 80s robots movies.
It's almost as if the 80s was a decade where we all went nuts, but that's normal. Okay, so
Greatest decade ever.
I was born in the 80s, all right?
yeah. All right, so let's go through and let's look at a couple other interesting error messages here. This one right here is a specific error message that I'd like to call everyone's attention to. This just indicates that something can't be found. And we've actually made it a policy. Going forward, we're not going to use the word error in our error codes because it's just a little bit redundant. But this was a very early on one. We built this one a long time ago, and we kind of adopted that policy later on. So what you'll see right here is that this is an example of something that could not be found. And this is one of the most common challenges because there's a lot of different circumstances where it can go on. A key example right here is if you're trying to call void transaction. If you call that void transaction once, you'll void the transaction. If you call it a second time, well, there's nothing to void. It's already been voided. So you're going to get transaction not found error message. If you're trying to delete something and you delete it twice, or if you delete something and then try to fetch it back, it's no longer going to be there. Have you inadvertently misspelled the code or ID of the object? I'd like to add to this something that I'm seeing more often nowadays. I'm seeing a lot of people work with multiple accounts. I know this was not really an example that we expected early on, but there's a lot of systems integrators who call me up and say, I got an entity not found error. Do you know what they're likely to be doing wrong?
Calling the wrong company.
They're calling the wrong company, or they're on the wrong account,
Yes.
or they're using the wrong credentials.
Right. Something is not matched right.
Exactly. This is actually one of the most common things. We might want to extend this explanation a little bit. Can somebody take a note on that? We can just go ahead and add some extra text here. We should just explain, hey, look, maybe you're on Sandbox, but you're looking for something on production. Hey, maybe you're using Bob's account, but Bob's account is only permitted to see certain objects and other accounts can see other objects. So in general, like when you have credentials to AvaTax, you have a view for only those things that you are permitted to see. If you try to see something you're not authorized to see, it's just like it doesn't exist. So you're going to get this not found error. So this is a pretty common challenge, and we should definitely continue to expand upon this documentation. Couple other interesting things right here. These parser errors are worth talking about a little bit. We're seeing more and more people experiment with the AvaTax API. So you know how you can call create company to create a company. You can call get company to fetch it back. Well, there's an interesting API here called query companies. And if I say I want to fetch the company where the code is default, oh, parser field name error. What's going wrong here? The field name code could not be found. I get it. It's actually company code. There you go. So whenever you are trying to fill in a parser value, company code, let's do ID equals Bob Smith. That's a parser field value error. The ID field is integer. Field named ID is type int32 and cannot be compared to Bob Smith. So all of these parser errors indicate that you've got some problem in your filter command. Let's try another one. Well, ID equals 1, hello. Well, we expected a conjunction. It's expecting and, ID equals 1 and ID equals 2. This is supposed to be an and or an or, but it's telling you, hey, look, this value should be either and or. So how does this filter stuff work? There's actually, oh, well, I can't really click on that, can I? There's actually a page in the documentation that if I go up here under use cases, it'll explain filtering and REST. And it will break down, here's how this stuff works, and here's how the logic functions. And it gives a couple examples. It gives examples for how to use apostrophes, complex multi-object examples using parentheses. So there's a whole lot of great stuff here. We hope that those error messages will adequately explain to you what it is that you can do to improve upon this error message. Jeb, is that another question there?
Yes. Does Avalara have a rate limit on API calls, and will I get 529 errors?
Oh, okay. So I think the answer is actually 429. Is that right?
429.
Okay. So my bad. Like, you know, it's easy to make a mistake on that one because sometimes server errors seem like they're server errors, but in this one, this is a denial of service. So we have a free API that we make available to everyone. If you go up here into the documentation, under here, there are free APIs. These free APIs are available to everyone to use. However, if you overuse them, you may get a too many requests error message. And that too many requests error message is something that we're constantly fine-tuning. So just don't go out there and call this API, 800 times a second. If you keep it to a reasonable level, you won't get that error message. But if you do get that error message, what you have to do is sleep your code for a little while, reduce your volume of calls, and then just make another one.
A related question to that, Ted. My error code told me that I need a subscription for this API. What do I do?
Well, if you need a subscription, the best thing to do is to call your customer account manager, right, John?
Yeah. If you're missing a subscription, you need to call and get it. You need to use it.
Hopefully the error message told you what subscription you need. I think there's actually an error message that says, let's see, subscription. Oops. Subscription required. So this error message should tell you what the subscription it is that you're required to get. And what you can do is you can call your account manager and say, hey, I'd like to investigate this subscription. What would it take to add it to AvaTax? This is one area where I know we're actually working to build an online storefront to allow you to add these subscriptions. Can somebody take a note? That would actually be a really good one to work with Ben Johnson on. Ben Johnson is the guy leading the store project. And I would love to have this error message include a link to go directly to that page in the store to say, hey, here's how you could choose to get that. We would love to make that easier. But for the moment, the best way to do it is to call your CAM and ask if there's a package available. Because the CAM will be able to let you know what discounts are available, whether you can get a special deal based upon your existing contracts. Oh, and now Jeff is flagging me down. I think we're actually running to the end of time here. I would like to mention, we really appreciate all of your questions. We'd love to continue to talk to you. Very briefly, our webinars are up to date. You can sign up for any of our webinars here on the developer site. We've got a half hour every single week where you can chat with us, and I think Jeff has some special ones planned coming up in the next month or two where we'll have more in-depth topics. Finally, if there are any questions that we couldn't get an answer for you right now, please go to the help forums, the AvaTax forums, and just write a post, go in here and write in your question. And again, that will probably go to Wayne, won't it?
I look forward to talking to you in the forums, actually.
Yeah, so we'd love to talk to you, and thank you all very much for spending a half hour out of your morning with us. See you next week.